Round-the-world racing has its origins in the great clipper ships of the last century. The crews of these square riggers would brave all weathers and race each other across oceans to be first into ports and get the best price for their cargoes. Their exploits became legend and inspired what is today the ultimate challenge in ocean racing, the Whitbread. Portsmouth, England, September 1973. 18 boats from 7 countries begin the first Whitbread round-the-world race. Watching the fleet leave the Solent was Sir Alec Rose, whose solo circumnavigation added fuel to those already fired up to organise a fully crewed race. Also bidding farewell to the yachts was Robin Knox-Johnston. Today he sails the same boat, Suhaili, which took him non-stop around the world to victory in 1969 in the Sunday Times Golden Globe Challenge.
I think that voyage probably focused people's mind on round-the-world sailing as a race, as opposed to just doing it as individuals. After all, up to that point, we'd had Chichester and Rose who'd done it as individuals and stopped off. The 9 of us set out to go non-stop, and that inevitably made it into a race. And I think people began to think from that point on, well, wait a minute, this could become a race, and let's make it interesting, let's stop off at certain places. And I remember discussing this at the time with the RNSA before that first race was organised.
The Royal Naval Sailing Association, with its worldwide membership, was the perfect yacht club to run such an event and remains at the helm to this day.
The first race was run very inexpensively, making use of the sort of naval contacts of the members of the RNSA in the then stopping ports in Cape Town and Sydney, Australia. Certainly in those countries and the UK, all the sort of naval officers were all trained together at Dartmouth at various levels. So there was a very strong old boy network, and I think that's really why the RNSA was the obvious choice.
But the race needed a sponsor, and Whitbread came on board. The best-known name in English brewing for 2 centuries, with their famous Shires, was already a major sponsor of horse racing. Luckily for the RNSA, a love of sailing as well as horses led to the partnership.
My uncle, who was chairman then, Colonel Bill Whitbread, was himself a very keen sailing man, and he had helped Sir Francis Chichester with a bit of sponsorship on his epic round-the-world voyage, and that's really how it all came about in 1973.
Among the leading competitors in that first race was former paratrooper Chay Blyth, fresh from his solo circumnavigation.
Come on!
Just as the RNSA relied heavily on their connections with the Royal Navy, so Chay turns to his military roots.
By going to the parachute regiment and saying to them, right, can you give us volunteers for a crew, you immediately got rid of all the huge logistical problems. In one foul swoop we had transport, in one foul swoop we had all the food we wanted, and so on and so on. So logistically it was a very good move on my part, I thought. The first thing, of course, was to work on team development, and we did that by going up to Scotland, and we were up there for about 3 weeks at a small cottage, and part and parcel of that was learning also the new language, overcoming the barriers to yachting, because there's a huge amount of barriers to yachting, and we also had in a lighter vein a sort of couth course, which was really quite fun, where the chaps, being paratroopers, had to learn how to deal with sort of very quack people. Equally so, of course, they were going into sort of very fancy parties. I mean, immediately our yacht Griffin 2 was launched by Her Royal Highness Princess Anne, so we were going into something they're not really used to, so we sort of trained them for that environment, and it worked very well. I have to say, they were immaculate as a team. We stood out like sore thumbs.
But one man stands head and shoulders above the rest, the only yachtsman to have sailed in all 5 Whitbread races, Peter Blake. The New Zealanders' first campaign was with skipper Leslie Williams aboard the British ketch Burton Cutter. He was watch captain.
I've never really been very keen on short distance around the buoys racing in a keelboat. So this really appealed to me a lot. I thought I'd like to have a go at it. And I'd sailed all long distance racing already anyway. I'd done a lot of ocean racing. So this was the ultimate, I suppose. And it was viewed by many people as a pretty crazy thing to do. But, I don't think people think that now.
Following closely the route sailed by the clipper ships, the first Whitbread took the fleet to Cape Town, then across the Southern Ocean to Sydney, Australia. Back into the Southern Ocean again, around Cape Horn to Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, before the final leg home to Portsmouth, 27,000 miles. Hot favourite to win was the 73-foot aluminium ketch Pondweek Cease, sporting a keel made of high-density spent uranium. But the high hopes of skipper Eric Taballet, the greatest name in French yachting, were soon dashed. 2.5 weeks into the race, and Pondweek's main mast came crashing down. The boat diverted to Rio, where a special replacement was flown out from France. However, it would snap again during the third leg, forcing Taballet to retire.